hosts, Dylan Weissman and Mike Langzer.
All right, Dylan, we are back. It's 2 weeks in a row, maybe?
Hey.
Or did we skip a week? Either way, we're here.
Don't call it a comeback.
Yeah, we're filming another episode 168 of Mastering Mitzvahs. I'm Mike, this is Dylan, and we've got a guest today that we're excited about.
Well, it's not just a guest. It's one of our favorite people ever.
VIPs, a
Right?
VIP.
A two-time mitzvah mom.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had her on the podcast before. She might be one of the only people who have had multiple guest spots on this podcast.
Today in a very different capacity, though.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's introduce the one and only Andrea Hecht.
Yeah, there's sound effects going on right now. Yeah.
I'm so honored to be here.
We miss you. It's been a while. For refresh our memory, how long ago was Sienna's bat mitzvah?
So not this past November, but the November before. I don't know.
That was like a year and a half ago at this point. Wow. I mean, it really does feel like yesterday. And your son's party was 2 years before that, roughly?
This was at the tail end of COVID. Yeah.
Yeah. Jonas was at Topgolf, and then Sienna. They had wildly different parties, which provides Andrea with lots of different experience there, which is great. But I think the outcomes for both of those celebrations were awesome. We were both there personally, so we love this family.
Yeah. So what we're talking about today is mental health, actually. And Andrea is a mental health specialist. Why don't you actually give your official title and your background, your schooling, so that people understand your legitimacy. And then let's talk about mental health while planning a bar or bat mitzvah.
Thank you. So I am a certified professional life coach. I actually also have a degree in education, a master's in education. But I really help families navigate transitions, different times, and a lot of emotion can come up when you're planning a mitzvah. And so I'm excited to be here to share that aspect of the planning process, because like you said, I was on the podcast before sharing about the parties, but this is something that we don't often talk about.
You've experienced the roller coaster, and we call it a roller coaster intentionally with some of our clients because there's highs and there's lows and there's stresses, and financially it's stressful, emotionally it's stressful. There's a religious aspect. There's the dynamic of what are the relatives going to think, what are the friends going to think. Like, there's a lot that goes into it, and I bet a lot of people do need a shrink by the time that they're done planning one of these things.
We don't talk about that enough. And I think that the families that we work with also don't talk about it enough. I feel as though it's so matter of fact in a lot of ways that we forget about the emotional side of things. And I think where Andrea can bring a lot of value is how we process these emotions, why they're important to understand, and what we do with it next.
Yeah.
For sure, because I think some people just think you're planning a big party, but really, you guys are milestone makers. And that at the end of the day, it's an important milestone. You should totally coin it. Yeah. That at the end of the day, you are planning a milestone. And I think so often people forget that that's front and center, that it's the milestone. And you guys throw an incredible party, and both my kids had so much fun. But I think we need to get back to what it is at the core, and it's a milestone, and it's a big transition in families' lives when your child is becoming an adult in the eyes of, the Jewish religion. And that can bring up a lot of emotion, that your baby that you used to, tie their shoes and help out the door is becoming an adult. And so I think that that's something that people really need to make sure that they recognize.
I hear what we're saying right now is the emotional impact on the adult, but let's also make sure we address in this podcast the emotional impact for the child themselves and the roller coaster that they experience too, because this is so multifaceted. It really isn't anything that we've truly dove into before.
It's a big part of this, and what I'm hoping that the families that listen to this get out of this is that the emotions not to ignore, the feelings not to ignore, because it's really easy to say, I just got to bury this side of it because I got to move on to the next decision or the next part of the service or the next part of studying, whatever it may be, and they kind of push those emotions down. And I think where Andrea can help us is to not ignore those.
Yeah.
Sure.
Let's start with what I hope is the easier, how do we manage the stress on the child? And how do we, what would be tip or suggestion you would give to a family who says, my son or daughter are so nervous, or they're not showing the interest that I want them to show. What advice would you give to that person?
I think just from the very beginning, as a family, I think you set the tone. And it goes back to what your family values are, and understanding even from a child, okay, what are our family values and what do we want this party to represent? And to bring it back again to the child. Is it someone that's full of energy? Is it someone that tends to be a little bit shyer and doesn't want to be in the spotlight? So setting that tone, coming up with almost like an intention or a word. So then when you're making decisions with your child, you can have that in mind. So is it a rock star child that wants to be on the dance floor all the time? Then when you're filtering decisions around it, you can do it with that in mind.
It's really interesting. We have a chapter in our book that we call the core values of the party. And when Dylan and I were assembling the book, that was something we did a whole podcast on. It was just, how do you figure out what the party should look like? And it was starting with core values.
What do you think, from a parent's perspective, what do you think is an emotion, a feeling, or a byproduct of the emotions that should not be ignored when it comes to just keeping yourself together for this thing?
I think, again, so often we think that the party is for us and it's a reflection of us. I think so much goes into planning a party because you're spending money, and there could be judgment around it. There could be shame around maybe you can't spend as much as someone else, or maybe you can, but you just don't want to because it doesn't reflect your family values. And so I think, again, it goes back to recognizing this is for your child. This is for your family. And when you, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you're thinking back to your mitzvah, what do you want to remember? And so, again, you want to remember the celebration, that this is an important milestone for your child. They're studying, they're growing up. And to keep that, again, going back to the values, keeping that front and center rather than I'm throwing a massive party for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Wow. My mind has got so many thoughts in so many different directions we could take this conversation. We see all the time families fight, which is sad. The husband and wife are fighting over what's important. The kid and the parents are fighting over what's important. So honing in on core values or family values, as you said, I think is definitely important. Is there a process that you think a family should do to evaluate what those core values are? Should they write them down? Should they put them on the wall somewhere? How do you get to, when we came up with our core values for our company, we sat down with a facilitator really, and he really pulled the ideas out of us, and then we were crossing things off and scratching them. It was a real process. So let's maybe start here. Is what would that process look like in a family's living room or kitchen, to figure it out?
So it's interesting. I can actually create maybe some kind of worksheet for people to start to think about, because whether it's a mitzvah or any kind of event or anywhere, I always talk about getting back to your values and setting the intention for something, because there's so much outside noise that when you have this one word, this one feeling, then you can filter everything out. So I think to start, just kind of going back to, I said I was an educator, putting something in the middle, like one word, and then starting to put the different spokes that go under it. So excitement, just brainstorming a bunch of different words. Each person in the family can kind of do that. And then you can almost see where is it overlapping. But I really do think that this should be front and center, just as important as creating a budget. this should be one of the very first steps that families do before they even begin the mitzvah planning process.
If that was clear, if the wheel and spoke process was clear to families, I'd imagine there would be less tension or arguments or fighting among either the parents or even parent to child or child to parent. I'd imagine that like there would be less because, hey, we're not going to fight over this because it actually doesn't even matter. It's not even on our board. It's not even on our vision. It's not even on our values. And because of that, it's not important and we should throw it away or not make it a part of it because it's not important.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Andrea,
You don't have that emotion then attached to it. You have something to lean on.
It's an anchor.
I was going to say North Star. Like you described having a North Star for a family planning. And sometimes families, they look up at the sky and just see 1,000 stars and like, which one is theirs?
Good.
Yeah. It's really, really interesting.
What about when things do get heated? People are people. What happens when things do get heated?
When things do get heated, again, taking it back. And if you do have that North Star, you have something to come back to and to center on. I think that people also have to communicate, that there's a big thing about like communication and expressing, okay, this is getting stressful for me because X, Y, and Z, and communicating that to your children and being open and honest, or maybe it's your spouse, like I have a different vision, and really keeping those lines of communication open, I think is really important too.
So in both of your experiences working with us, you hired event planners in different capacities. You are a very creative person and a very hands-on person. I'm going to ask what prompted you to hire somebody when you probably could have done it yourself, but what I'm getting to is a lot of times planners have like the nickname, like I'm the family counselor. I'm the negotiator within the family. Like, did you have that experience, and how does it correlate, the importance of having an event planner or having some sort of support system like a life coach involved,
So in anything, I think support is important. So yes, I very well could have planned the whole thing. I forgot to mention, way back before I became an educator and a life coach, I did do large corporate events. But again, there's so much emotion. And so when someone can look at something from an outside perspective, I think that is really helpful. I know even just working with both of you, there were times, I think it was with Sienna in particular, I don't know if I wanted to bring in some extra games during the cocktail hour, and you understood that what our total vision was, to have one hectic night. And you even said, okay, I think enough is enough. Like you sometimes need that outside perspective because you get so close to it, and there is that emotional component to it because, again, the emotions that your child is getting older, but also the financial emotional component to it. So having some kind of outside support is really helpful.
Let's take this another step further, because I think a lot of families miss that point and they think a planner is just there to create a timeline or to find you vendors. But can we talk a little bit more about the emotional support that you get from hiring the right vendors and or planners?
Yeah, they're a sounding board for you. So again, you can have your spouse, family members, your child be a sounding board, but each of them, again, has a vested emotional interest in it. And when you have someone from an outside perspective, again, they can say it like it is and kind of, take a bird's eye view and let you know when things, need to change or what you need to do.
I want to touch on something that's not on this topic, but it's important for the life coach side of things. And that is that a bar bat mitzvah planning is this much of your life. It may seem massive in the beginning and it may seem massive while it's happening. And maybe the only thing you think about for 18 months. Andrea, how do you balance the living and the life that you have both before, during, and after the bar bat mitzvah planning?
That's a very interesting question because you can get all consuming. I am a life coach. I was all consuming. I think I was all consuming because that's just my personality. I'm very much into all the little details, the napkin color, the flowers, everything. But like you said, at the end of the day, it's a micro moment. It's a really big moment. It's a huge milestone. But if you can look at the greater picture of it and recognizing that you do need to continue to live, you still need to cheer your child on the sports fields, in the theater, making sure that they're, showing up for their activities, you showing up for work or whatever it is that you're doing in the other important things in your life. And I think if you can look at it as a moment and not the only thing that's going to be happening in that year, that can take off some of the pressure too. I think we put on extra pressure on ourselves if we feel as though this is like a huge, massive thing that's happening in a year. Yes, it feels like a huge, massive thing because we spend tons of money on it, and the old joke is, you could take a new car and like drive it off the cliff or something. Like, so there's that emotional component to it that you are spending so much money on it. But at the end of the day, it's one moment in your child's life.
It's one moment, but it is a lasting memory.
Yes.
I often after a party, I call a family and, everything was amazing. We love you guys. I say, now what are you going to do with your free time? And it's like, oh my God, I don't know. I'm thinking like, we've never had a conversation like this before. So this is like such an organic, free flowing, conversation. But, you always hear like an 80-20% rule in everything in life. And I wonder if there should be an 80-20% rule in planning. Like, in your 24 hours in a day, or let's call it 16 hours that you're awake, do you put 20% of the time into mitzvah planning and 80% of the rest of the day into all those other things, school, work, cooking, family? Like, some families probably have that inversed, and 80% of their day is the stress of the party.
That's an interesting perspective too, because you have same event. You can approach it through multiple lenses. I talk about this all the time. And when you approach something from a stress lens, you put your body into fight or flight. Like, from a psychological standpoint, you're not able to think logically. Like, when you're in fight or flight, your brain is literally offline. So if you can flip it and look at it as, this is an exciting time, like reframing. I do that a lot with the people that I work with. Reframing, this is an exciting time. It's not stressful. Yes, there are going to be moments of stress, but you get to choose the energy that you put towards it. So thinking about, okay, this shouldn't be all consuming. Maybe in the very end, in those like last crunch, like couple of days, and you're scrambling to get everything ready and your guests are starting to come into town and you're doing your final fittings or whatever it is. But up to that point, this is one bucket in the things that you do in your day. I talk about like becoming almost like the CEO of your life, and each person on your daily plan should have like buckets, like work, children, life, whatever. This should be a small bucket, but not everything.
I'm reading a book right now on leadership, and the chapter that I was listening to this morning on my drive in was talking about fear. Fear of public speaking, fear of conflict, fear, like all different fears. And she went on to say that most times that you're afraid of something, the fear is overcome within 8 seconds. And she had studies and statistics say that. And then the next thing she said was, you could do anything in your life for 8 seconds. There's nothing that you can't do. And she used the riding a bull analogy. Like, that's scary, but if you ride the bull for more than 8 seconds, you've succeeded. And like, that mindset was so interesting for me to hear. So I want to maybe rapid fire here, just a couple tips or tricks that you would suggest to a family to overcome their fears or their stresses. We were talking about stress just before, or to mitigate some of those stresses as they plan a party.
Well, again, that's interesting because I think so often we don't like to experience those negative emotions. And sometimes, like you said, in 8 seconds, you got to ride the wave. So that fear, as far as helping, again, I think going back to starting with your core values, you do it, sit down, with your partner or alone, do it, and then work with your child. I think setting boundaries within your family. Who are you going to be talking to? Maybe you need to tune out some of the social media scrolling, because now it's keeping up with everyone else. And I love social media. But as you're scrolling and as it's getting closer to your mitzvah time, you might need to mute some people's accounts, and not in a mean way, but to protect yourself mentally, because you're constantly seeing, oh, this person threw this out at their party. And so again, putting up boundaries with also maybe guest list, and recognizing, okay, these are the people that we want to invite. And again, you can filter it back to what your core value is, what your intention, word, North Star for the party. I think those are a few ideas.
I want to add one that's in our book, and it was that a family should have a regular scheduled planning meeting with the family, like husband, wife, kids, all call it every Thursday at 6 o'clock, are going to sit in a certain spot in the house without distraction. And when we came up with this concept, it made a lot of sense. Whether it's in the kitchen, but not while you're eating, or whether it's in the living room, not with the TV on, and just have that weekly check-in. So I think that's another great tip.
I would add to that just one thing, because that came up even, so Jonah now is a senior and going to college. And a tip that was given to us is, when you're talking to your child about college planning and whatever, don't do it all the time, because they have other things that are going on in their life, going back to that 80-20 thing. So when you're planning your child's mitzvah, every time they get in the car and you're driving them, don't shoot them with a million questions about what color do you want this, and do you want that sweatshirt, and should we do this, and should we do that. They have other things that they're trying to focus on. They're trying to socialize and navigate the awkwardness of middle school. They're trying to navigate, being on the sports team, or learning lines for the theater, whatever it is, homework, right, all that stuff. So when you can control the things that you can control, and that is minimizing when and where and how often you talk about it, can help reduce stress too.
You mentioned that there should be a standing meeting to plan. There should be a standing time to not talk about it, at all.
Yeah, the boundaries that
right?
You said, Andrea. Yeah.
Make sure that there's a time in the day or in the week where you're not talking about any of that stuff.
Well, using that drive to soccer practice example, yeah, maybe there needs to be that boundary. When we're driving to soccer practice, we're going to talk about soccer, or we're going to talk about school. We're not going to talk about mitzvah, because, gosh, it really is overwhelming. Yeah.
It's overwhelming for everyone, because you think that there are so many little details. The one other thing that I would say, plug to you guys, trust the people that you hire to work with. You hire them on purpose. And so you spent all these hours doing something, and at the end of the day, when the music starts, just have fun. You're the family, you set the tone, your child, you set the tone, and let the professionals take over from there, because you're not just playing music. You read the crowd, you create whatever the intention or tone is that your family has asked you to do. And so that's really important, because I think everyone also plans and doesn't live in the moment.
Right. Hey, Andrea, I want to give a plug for you personally, for your service that you offer, and for other life coaches out there. What type of programs are available for people? First off, is it in person? Is it face-to-face? Is it Zoom? Do you suggest weekly, monthly, or as needed? What would a family in planning crisis, want to explore?
So everything I do in person, but I do a lot of virtual because I just think that's really easy for people. They can pop on for a 45-minute, hour session and be done. And I think it can be something maybe in the beginning of the planning process, if there needs to be a facilitator talking through the values and intention and all of that, helping facilitate setting up the boundaries. And then maybe there's check-ins throughout. I guess it really depends on the person and what they need, but definitely in the very beginning, I think would be helpful for families.
Interesting, because I bet most people towards the end where it's overwhelming, like, oh my God, I need somebody to help me. But if they started with a North Star, with a vision, that guidance really makes sense right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, so you're
Wrap
not
it up, Mike.
scrambling.
So if people wanted to find you and speak with you a little bit more, we know you're all over the world, but what's the easiest way for them to find you?
Thank you. So it is on Instagram, Fully Informed Life Coaching. And you can find me that way. I also have a podcast called The Next Chapter, HER. But really the best way is to find me through Instagram.
Amazing. And you're in the process of writing a blog for our website that we're really excited about. That's going to talk about, it's going to more or less summarize this, talk about, just mental health while planning events. And Andrea, you have our support. We love you. We love your family. And if families are stressed, we really suggest that they reach out to you just for an initial consult, get an idea of, what services you could provide. And we thank you for being here and making time for us today.
Thank you for allowing me to have this conversation with you.
Sweet. So that was episode 168, Mastering Mitzvahs, with a great friend of ours, Andrea Hecht. That's Mike. I'm Dylan. We're Xplosive, all things explosive at XE Events. Until we see you next time, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you guys soon.